So, good morning again, everyone. I want to talk this morning. I want to teach from a Japanese proverb that translates roughly as if you are in a hurry, go the long way around. If you're in a hurry, go the long way around. And this may seem like nonsense at first. If we're pressed for time, why would we choose the longer path? But what's embedded in this contradiction is a really practical insight that secular Buddhism, I think, offers for our lives. And it is that this frantic urgency is itself an obstacle on our path. This hurry up sickness in our culture is a huge obstacle to our progress on the path. What appears to be a shortcut often leads us further from where we want to be. We live in this era of optimization, of hacks. We hack our sleep, we hack our meals, we hack our relationships. We seek the fastest route. We want shortcuts, the quickest fix. Any life hack that will collapse months of effort into days, that's our culture. And yet, for all this rushing, we find ourselves perpetually behind. We're anxious, we're exhausted, and oddly, we're no closer to feeling any satisfaction or inner peace than when we began. So, from a Buddhist perspective, this is not surprising. We talk all the time about dukkha, this pervasive unsatisfactoriness. It's just not some philosophical abstraction. It's a precise observation about what happens when we're driven by craving and aversion rather than by seeing things clearly. When we are in a hurry, we are by definition in the grip of aversion. Aversion to the present moment, aversion to being late, aversion to uncertainty, aversion to the discomfort of not getting what we want. And this aversion shrinks our world, it narrows our vision. And so we end up grabbing at shortcuts, quick fixes, the way a drowning person would grab at anything within reach. But all this does is make our situation worse. Okay, so let's look for a moment at how this might play out practically. Think about, and we've all been there, I think, the student who crams the night before the exam, bypassing the steady accumulation of knowledge throughout the semester, or the person who rushes into a new relationship sort of blindly to escape loneliness, only to find themselves entangled in a messy relationship that they didn't use clear seeing to get involved in, or the worker who cuts corners on a project to meet a deadline and then spends twice as long cleaning up and fixing the mistakes. In each case, the shortcut created more suffering, not less. So going the long way around is not about being slow for slowness' sake. It's not about passivity or procrastination dressed up in spiritual language. It is about aligning our actions clearly with reality rather than being driven by our anxiety and the push to get everything done yesterday. The long way around in the proverb means doing the thing properly the first time, doing it with discernment, doing it with an intention, with purposefulness. And we need to be mindful to do this. We bring our full attention to the task at hand rather than rushing through it while mentally leaping ahead to the next thing. I'm working on this, but I'm already planning the next thing. We this if we do the thing properly the first time, we tend to do things well. And things done well rarely need to be redone. And the irony here is that paradoxically, it takes less time because we're not having to clean up a bunch of mess. We're respecting the natural pace that life unfolds, that some things simply cannot be rushed. And boy, do I know this well in my own life. So think about grief, for instance. It has its own timeline. When I work with people that are grieving, you can't rush it. Or trust builds incrementally. Or skills developed through repetition. What did Malcolm Gladwell say? You have to do something 10,000 times to get it right or something. We don't learn to play the guitar in 2 days. A seed that I plant in my little garden doesn't grow faster just because I'm impatient to see the flower. The practice of mindfulness teaches us to observe the natural rhythms of life. That alone is a practice. Stepping back, observing the natural rhythms of life. And here again, I take teachings every day from my dogs because they understand the natural rhythms of life. They know when it's time to eat, when it's time to go outside. They don't rush around madly, 3 hours beforehand. When we stop fighting with the reality of the natural rhythms of life, we stop wasting our energy on resistance. And that energy then becomes available for the task itself. Critically in this process is we pause before we act. The pausing allows us to sort of get our ducks in a row. We train ourselves to notice that gap between stimulus and response. As soon as we get triggered, we don't immediately rush in with guns blazing. And that gap between stimulus and response is the long way around that the proverb references. So, and this is, boy, where I get into trouble. Instead of reacting immediately to an email that annoys me or angers me, I take a breath. I get up, I walk away. I might wait an hour. I might wait a day. I notice the heat in my chest, the tightening in my jaw. But I let that reactivity pass through me. I don't respond to it. Because if I wait, and I've had to learn this the hard way, I respond from a place of clarity. Yes, it takes longer in that moment. Maybe it takes 30 seconds longer, an hour longer, a day longer. But it prevents weeks of damage control that a reactive response often require. So here again, we end up in the Buddha's middle way. The proverb is not asking us to abandon urgency entirely or to drift through life without purpose or direction. There are genuine emergencies that require immediate response. If I'm gushing blood, I can't sit around and think about it. I better put pressure on it. There are real deadlines that we have to meet. I have to get my insurance paid on time, or it'll lapse. But the middle way asks us to hold even those goals with a firm gentleness. Committed but not clinched. I talk about the open and closed fist all the time. Purposeful but not panicked. When we are truly in a hurry, when something genuinely matters and time is short, that is precisely when we need the steadiness that the long way around provides. Think about this. Do you want your surgeon rushing through your appendectomy? Or do you want your pilot landing in a dangerous crosswind? I don't think so. These folks move with deliberate precision because the stakes are so high. Their training teaches them that panic and haste are the enemies of confidence. And we can, in smaller ways, train ourselves similarly. For instance, each time we sit down to meditate and we get that urge to get up, our phone bings and we're pulled to check it, to be done with meditation. We just take a breath and stay put. We are practicing the long way around. We are building in that space, that gap. We are building the capacity to remain steady when everything in us, including all the cultural messages, are screaming at us to take the shortcut. Now, there's another layer to this proverb that connects to our understanding of impermanence and ego. Our hurry is often driven by a fear that if we don't act now, the opportunity will vanish. Impermanence will kick in, the opportunity will vanish, the situation will deteriorate, we will be left behind. But this misunderstands impermanence. Impermanence, yes, things change, but it doesn't mean that we're worried about opportunities vanishing. Things change regardless of whether we rush or not. Rushing doesn't stop the change. Rushing doesn't stop the river of time. It only causes us to stumble on the banks of the river. When we truly internalize the concept of impermanence, not as some grim fact, some terrible situation, but as the living texture of reality of everyday life. When we see that, then we are more likely to take the long way around. We often find that our relationship with time shifts when we embrace that. We become less desperate about controlling the outcome because we understand that outcomes are always provisional. Now, this is not fatalism. This is not, oh, why bother? This is true freedom because we are free from the tyranny of urgency. We are free from that hurry up sickness. We choose our path, our actions based on wisdom rather than panic in the moment. So this simple proverb inspires a practice that the next time we truly feel rushed, notice that urgency. Notice the physical sensations of hurry up. There's going to be shallow breathing. There's going to be tension in our body. Our mind's going to race ahead of our actions. This is when we ask ourselves, what am I afraid of right now if I slow down? And often the answer reveals something important. Are we afraid of disappointing someone? Are we afraid of disappointing ourselves? Are we afraid of being seen as incompetent? Perhaps we're afraid of the quiet and the stillness itself, of what we might feel if we stopped moving long enough to really feel it. But whatever the answer to that question is, we hold it with compassion. And then we can then ask, what would the long way around look like now? Maybe it just means taking 5 minutes to plan before plunging into action. I mean, the number of times I've just, barreled ahead and it blows up in my face, it's way too much. Maybe it means having that difficult conversation we've been avoiding, because avoidance is its own kind of shortcut. Maybe it means simply taking one full breath before we begin acting. The Japanese proverb, if you are in a hurry, go the long way around, it's not some mystical pie in the sky advice. It is ruthlessly practical because it tells us what we already know, but continually forget. Something we all grew up hearing, haste makes waste. That panic and urgency clouds our judgment. That the shortest distance between 2 points is not always a straight line, especially when that straight line runs us right off a cliff. Our practice offers the tools to embody this wisdom, to see our hurry up clearly and to see the price we pay for it, to build tolerance for the discomfort that comes with pausing, with not hurrying up. I mean, we can feel it in our gut. We can feel that urgency. It is a very unique feeling when we pay attention to it. And we understand impermanence as a way of loosening our white knuckle grip on outcomes. Golly, I just must bear down, clench down, and get this done. Because I'm suggesting to you this morning, it's a long way around. It's not a detour. It is the path itself. And we walk it with full attention, one step at a time. And more often than not, it is the path that actually gets us where we need to go. So those are some thoughts this morning on the long way around. Let me stop this.